know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers, and welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. Patreon.com/punklautopod is where you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. For $1, you get... What did we do last week? Nothing. Oh. Last week, we did a little bit of a switcheroo going on with the Patreon. I guess we can go ahead and announce this here. We're streamlining the Patreon. One of the reasons is a lot of our recording times were getting really long, especially if we did some of the more time-intensive episodes like a bracketology or a chart dive, where we felt the need to, we had to finish it. And sometimes taking 2 hours to record that audio to get it done, it was just starting to eat up a lot of time. So, going forward, what we are going to start doing for our weekly bonus audio is we're going to do a hybrid of News of the World and I'm Listening, where we talk about the news stories that have happened over the last week and what we listened to over the last week. So, instead of doing a whole month's worth of stories or a whole month's worth of what we listened to, it'll just be what we listened to and read about throughout the week. I think it'll be fun. We haven't done one yet, so we'll probably try that out for the first time the week this episode goes up, so most likely the next day after this episode goes up.
Yeah,
and I'm looking forward to doing it. I'm looking forward to...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll see how the peanut butter and jelly ification of those two formats into one episode goes. It might be that we should alternate them, which was kind of the original suggestion, and then we were like, well, why don't we just put them together? Make the news stories fresher and the stuff we've listened to more recent in memory and probably easier to talk about. Smaller pool of records to talk about each time, but it should wash out to where we're covering the same amount of stuff over the course of a month, which is not streamlining the Patreon show is not to say that things like bracketologies will go away forever.
Right.
We might. I mean, we haven't made any plans on this yet, but I think in my head I was thinking like, well, the bracketology, we've done brackets as the main episode before.
Yeah.
Certainly is something we could do again in the future. So something along those lines, maybe year-specific deep dive episodes could be like a main feed type of episode that comes up from time to time. We've considered that in the past too, where we've talked about, we've done, best of episodes where it wasn't the best of that year. It was the best of, whatever, 10, 15, 20 years ago that we might have done. But
yeah, just, shaking things up a little bit, making our recording times a little easier. You probably, as a listener, won't see too much of a difference in the amount of audio. Like, it'll still probably be the same amount of stuff, because I do plan on continuing my solo series. In fact, last week, what we're going to consider our bonus audio is the 21st Century Breakdown that I published last Monday. So that'll be that week's bonus audio. I have toyed with the idea of maybe throwing this month's Extra Play as a bonus audio too. Maybe we'll consider that, just to tide people over instead of them being like, why didn't we get a regular bonus this week? Well, we're changing things, so. But
yeah, there will be plenty of content.
Yeah, I'll still do the Metal Cool Chronicles. I'll still do Challenge Geography. I'll still do all that kind of stuff. And when I finish this 21st Century Breakdown, those will continue. But yeah, so you'll still roughly get the same amount of audio you've been getting. I need to do some more movie reviews. I'm behind. I've watched a couple things now. I just haven't had a chance to record them. And Moonpipes or Misfits, all that stuff will still be there. So you won't see too much of a difference. We'll just do certain gimmicks less frequently is really the main thing.
And, things like the chart dives, we've already hit some of the same years again on chart dives. And it's kind of like, well, we're running out of charts to dive on for some years. And so the Billboard chart episodes, they can be fun, but those are some of the most time consuming.
Yeah, especially when you do as many picks as we've been doing. Yeah, I don't know if those will come back. Yeah, we've exhausted
Also-
the charts.
Also, the Billboard chart dives probably are the least essential thing for us to cover on our show. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, Asia singles.
Yeah, they're fun to do, but yeah, they are very time consuming. And so yeah, we'll still do lots of stuff there. We'll still have plenty of content there for you. But yeah, we're trying to make recording easier on ourselves. So yeah, you might even notice a little bit of change in the structure of this episode, but you'll see. Maybe that one won't be as obvious. That'll just be like, oh, okay, they're doing this now. But
It'll just be, hey, they figured out how to do the show better.
yeah,
Hopefully.
7 years in, yeah, still figuring out how to do the show. But that's okay, because like one of my favorite podcasts, it's a network too. They restructure their show every couple of years. Like they basically they have so much like bonus content they do. They kill shows and they redo the formats, start new shows. So yeah, everybody's doing it. If I think change is very good with podcasts, especially so you don't get too stale and just repetitive and doing the same thing over and over again. So we will still be doing an album a week. That will stay the same. We'll just format the show just a little slightly differently. But yeah, all that bonus audio, $1 Patreon. You can also sign up at our $5 tier, which gets you access to a once-a-month exclusive bonus audio, where this month we did Chronic Town by R.E.M., which we should have done last month, but we got very swamped with everything. So it was a little bit behind, but we got it out there finally. And if you want to vote in next month's poll, the poll is open now. So let's go ahead and say what we have nominated. So up in the poll right now, it is Spiral Scratch by the Buzzcocks from 1977. It is All Roy for Prez by the band All from 1988. We have Humanity is the Devil by Integrity from 1996. And we have the Ergs Lemuria Split from 2007. So if you want to vote in that poll, go to the Patreon, sign up for the $5 tier, and you'll get the bonus audio that comes with that at the end of the month or the beginning of the next month. One of the two. You also get access to show notes as well. I put all my show notes up there. And you get your name said on the show, so we have to shout out our producers. So thank you to Dave Brown, no longer the host of One Band 5 Songs, but the writer of the blog and newsletter Oklahoma Lefty. Shout out to Jason W., writer of the newsletter Songs About Chocolate and Girls. Shout out to Steve Long, host of the podcast Rebel Nerd Radio. And shout out to Zach in Oregon, who is not impressed by people who walk their dogs without a leash. So, yeah, if you want to sign up, get your name said, join that $5 tier. And we have the $10 tier where you get to choose the album we devote an entire episode to. So, all the plugs are out of the way. We can get into the show. So, today's episode is based on an album released in the year 2010. And we like to take a look at albums that have come out that year. And what do we got going on in 2010?
2010, I'm very familiar with because I was 20 years old. Pretty plugged into what punk music was doing that year. And I've kind of broken it down into major genres and trends. Probably the furthest thing from the album that we're talking about, but certainly a big trend at the time was the grind and crust going on in hardcore and heavy music, and sort of coming out of the smart metal scene of the late 2000s. You've got Nails put out Unsilent Death, Black Breath put out Heavy Breathing. There's Kvelertek's self-titled record, which I remember being a pretty big deal when it came out. Similarly, certainly overlapping to a degree, you have what I would call real hardcore. It's kind of my air quotes real hardcore. Because that was kind of the mentality I think that a lot of people had, and we've called it Death Wish hardcore in the past. It's that much more 80s and 90s influenced hardcore sound, gaining more traction and kind of subverting a lot of people who were maybe into the scene core stuff that was huge in the 2000s. This is where it's sort of a neo-traditional hardcore approach starts to happen, I think, and really starts to take over the genre. Really exemplary stuff like Ceremonies Roanoke Park, Messy Isn't It by Dangers, Punch put out Push Pull, a legacy band, Integrity, puts out The Blackest Curse, which was not a huge deal, but a solid record. I mean, it's Dwid and his integrities by that point, but it's a solid record. And then there's, I didn't even run down the whole list of like everything that Death Wish was putting out at that time, but they were definitely very active. Also on the real and kind of neo-traditional and revival styles of music going on, emo and screamo obviously are having a huge moment in this time period. Anyone who remembers that time period remembers that being very much the peak of the emo revival. So Snowing put out I Could Do Whatever I Want If I Wanted, their sole LP. Joie de Vivre did the North End. Grown Ups put out more songs. Tons more bands in that Count Your Lucky Stars, Top Shelf Records, that Square of Opposition, those labels. And similarly, kind of concurrently, you've got a screamo revival blow-up moment kind of happening, which leads into the wave, as it has been called. So Pianos Become the Teeth put out Old Pride. The Saddest Landscape did You Will Not Survive. Kind of quick rundown, I guess there's the indie surf thing is happening pretty big. I feel like that starts to get into the lane that we're going to be talking about with the album. But stuff from Waves, The Drums, Beach Fossils, Best Coast, Surfer Blood, shit ton of bands with beach and surf names.
Yeah.
And you've got the orgcore stuff and some folk punk stuff. Gaslight Anthem did American Slang. Against Me did White Crosses. Messengers did Chamberlain Waits. Leatherface put out Stormy Petrol. Nana Griesel, Defiance Ohio, Paul Barabeau. More folk punk stuff going on at that time. And then there's, gent and some lingering metalcore and some easycore stuff going on. So punk's a lot of different things at this time period.
Yeah. Looking at all of those sounds and trends that you were describing there, it's kind of funny how many of them were happening at the same time. Like that grind crust thing went on for a really long time, especially with Nails inspired bands. There were so many bands who were doing the Nails kind of thing after they did it, and which is basically just like Entombed inspired hardcore is really what they're doing. The real hardcore pivot, I do remember at the time, like a lot of the guys that we would run into at shows back when like metalcore was the big thing locally, a lot of them had started to pivot to doing the more Death Wish kind of thing, which our band had even done that too. The old band was the metalcore band All the Living, and then we turned it into Cinder and Smoke, which was a more like Death Wish inspired hardcore band.
Yeah, very cursed and Converge influenced.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that emo revival, that was a big deal at the time too. Like it was probably the most consuming trend of that year. I feel like that had the biggest umbrella of bands doing that kind of thing. And then it burned out, within a few years, because you can only tap the guitar so many different ways. But
I think you and I burned out.
I mean, that's fair.
That sound has never gone away.
Yeah, people say we're on a new wave, but really it's just a continuation of the previous wave. Like that last wave never really died. But
yeah, it feels like it's the same.
Yeah, because they're doing the same things. Maybe at the tail end of the 2010s is when you maybe saw the least amount of it that you were going to see, but those bands weren't gone. They were just, still putting out records. They just weren't as popular. The indie surf phenomenon is weird. That is like one of the weirder things that happened in that time period. I don't know what it was about indie rock that was just like, we like surf riffs now. It's like, okay. And lots of reverb on our vocals.
I feel like it's a delayed side effect of everybody trying to do their version of Pet Sounds in the early 2000s. I feel like it's people went and listened to those records and then went and listened to Pet Sounds and then kind of branched out into surf music in general from there. The surf influence in music is odd how it comes and goes, because it has come back again recently with like the surf punk stuff. It's a very limited genre.
Yeah, I mean, you can only do so many things with it. Like, yeah, I mean, that's it. That's all you can do. And then, yeah, orgcore is still continuing to become less relevant. Even like the folk punk stuff isn't as big of a deal at this point. Like that even feels like it's a little bit on the downturn. But yeah, the orgcore Against Me, Gaslight Anthem, Mensagers, like all that stuff. Yeah, those are still the big bands. Those are still the ones who kind of continue that sound to this day. Well, not so much Against Me, but yeah, it's a we're on the downslope of that sound. We are phasing that out. And then like Gent, that kind of comes its own whole thing that you and I are not really tapped in at all. Then like you have your dinosaurs, your lingering metalcore bands, your Norma Jeans, your Underoaths, and yeah, Easycore. Easycore is pretty big. You mentioned Wonder Years, but this is also the same year as like A Day to Remember and 4 Years Strong, and that hasn't I don't even think that sound has peaked yet in 2010. No. I think that's about to get bigger. But yeah, very interesting stuff going on in 2010. I'd say it's a transitionary period, but it didn't transition to anything else. Like, this just kind of became what everything was for a couple years. And then after that, who even knows what punk music is? I don't know.
Yeah, it really kind of is. The early 2010s is the dying gasp of punk.
As a major scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, because, in the late 2010s, it feels very much like everybody's just like, we're just all doing indie rock now. That's all, we're all doing indie rock, we're all doing power pop. And that's even kind of continued into the 2020s, where like, we're all doing jangle pop now, So it's,
I mean, it's stronger now generally than it was in the late 2010s, because we have, hardcore bands in Taco Bell commercials, We have the pop punk revival thing for a minute. So there's some cultural cachet to claiming punk and hardcore more than punk, but yeah, but even still, it's there's a lot of the shoegaze, new gaze stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as strong as it was in the 2010s, early 2010s.
Well, it's your turn to choose the album for this week's episode, but what are some other records that you were considering for us to talk about?
So I also considered You Are Beneath Me by End of the Year. I really liked that record when it came out. I loved that record when it came out. It's easily one of the most listened to records from that year. We had gotten into their stuff just prior to that LP coming out. There was that EP that came out before it and some of the other stuff that they did. I think we had downloaded and spent a lot of time with. So we were kind of on the ground floor for that one. That was one you wait for, I guess. I don't know about you. I very much burned myself out on this record. And I know you and I generally burned ourselves out on End of the Year, Self-Defense Family. I think everybody did.
Maybe even the band. Because even they're not really a thing anymore.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since they put anything out. And Drug Church has taken over so much of Pat's time that it's like, yeah, I could see End of the Year pretty much being done.
So I thought this one might be interesting to revisit, kind of see if it holds up. My suspicion is that maybe it wouldn't really hold up that much for me. That's probably ultimately why I passed on it. But I also considered Songs for Burning Lovers by Burning Love. That definitely fits in the crust, Death Wish, real hardcore sound that I was talking about. Huge influence on us, the music that we were making at that time, and we were supposed to play a show with Burning Love, but their van broke down. We did play with Coliseum on that show. I think there's enough to talk about with Burning Love as a Chris Colohan project and kind of our personal history with it, but Burning Love is really not the most essential band.
Have we even done a Colohan band?
Which we haven't, and that also kind of weighs on my decision to not go with this record, because I was like, I'd probably would rather do the Swarm or a Cursed record if we're going to do a Colohan band. This Burning Love record is really good, but I don't know how much there is to say about it specifically as an album. And I considered Of Gold by Bars of Gold, the debut album by Bars of Gold, which was the post Bear vs. Shark band. It had Mark Pathy doing vocals, and it had the same drummer from the first Bear vs. Shark record, but not the second one. That was very much like getting in on the ground floor of Bear vs. Shark, which was a band that I had missed, that we missed. We weren't interested in that kind of music when they were active, and then they broke up, and then eventually not long after is when we started listening to them a ton. I loved this Bars of Gold record. I don't think any Bars of Gold record is as good as either of the first two Bear vs. Shark records, but they're really good albums. But they kind of took a while between every album, so I feel like I haven't listened to Of Gold in a long time. Because it was kind of like you would start to wear out listening to their albums, and then they'd put out a new one, and you're like, great, I'm going to listen to this one all the time. And then eventually you kind of run out of gas on that one, and then you get the next one, and then they haven't done anything in a while. So haven't revisited Bars of Gold lately, though. I'm sure it would have been a good record to listen to, but didn't pick this one.
Yeah, we have previously covered the year 2010 a couple times now, and prior to this, at episode 285, we did Bullet for My Valentine's Fever as a birthday spanking. And episode 228, we did Castavet's The Echo and the Light. We did that with Hugo Reyes of the Violent Treatment podcast. We did episode 183, Reviver's self-titled LP. We did that with, I believe that was with the members of Cluttered. Episode 76, we did Tiger's Jaw's Two Worlds album, along with Lemuria's Chautauqua County EP under our old album EP format with the Angry Girl Music podcast. And episode 36, we did Big Kids Hoop Dreams and Empire Empires, I Was a Lonely Estate. Oh, that was a split, too, with Into It Over It. Man, we did 3 bands on that one. Wild. And, funnily enough, that episode inspired one of the members of Big Kids to start writing music again. Like, one of the reasons. I'm not taking sole credit, though he did directly tell me that listening to us talk about that record made him want to start writing some stuff again. So, we'll take some credit on that one.
We did this.
Yeah.
We say that all the time.
Yeah,
but
I guess it's different when it's
actually
like...
did.
Yeah.
Had to influence someone.
Yeah, Jason from Big Kids started off a new project called Pigeon Island. And it's very much sonically in the same vein as Big Kids, which he initially told me it was going to be a Big Kids record, but then I guess decided against it. But yeah, still very cool. I guess if it was my turn, man, I was actually like scrolling the entire time trying to figure out like what I would select if it was my turn to choose something for 2010. And if I don't mention anything that, you know, we've already talked about, that's what makes it really difficult for me to find. The biggest record of 2010, though, that matters to me, I guess, is probably Iron Sheik's Not Like This. That came out in 2010. We've done the Constant one, so, I mean, maybe I wouldn't wind up choosing this record, but that's a major, major record for me. Like, top 10 all-time favorite album, you know? So maybe. That would have been on the list. That would have been an option for me to choose, but that's a big record. And an important record, along with the Reviver album, because then the Latterman sound becomes a bigger deal in the next couple years. Well, all right, let's get into the album you did select for us to talk about. So, you were given the year 2010, and you selected Majesty Shredding by Superchunk. Some stats on the band. Superchunk are from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. They formed in 1989. This was released September 14th, 2010 on Merge Records and is the band's 9th studio album. It was the follow-up to their 2001 album, Here's to Shutting Up, and the person on this record is Jim Wilbur on guitar, John Worster on drums, Laura Balance on bass, and Mac McCon on guitar and vocals. The record was recorded by Scott Salter, with some additional recording by Mac McCon, and it was engineered by John Plymale. Salter had previously recorded The Mountain Goats, Spoon, and Okerville River. And some additional musicians on the record. We have John Darnell of the Mountain Goats providing additional vocals on the opening track, Digging for Something, as well as Seamus Kinney on trombone, Matt Kinney on trumpet, and Mark Dahlman on tuba, who all three of those members were part of a band called, I don't know how to say it, it's SNMNMNM. Is it synonym, maybe? Just with all the vowels, or I don't know exactly what. Yeah, I don't know what it is, but... they're a Durham band, and Kristen Beard on the viola. And here's a fun little stat. We have some photography in the liner notes by our friend PJ Sykes of the band Hoax Hunter. I didn't know he had some artwork and some photos in the liner notes of this record. Dig out my copy and look at it, see what pictures are in there. And this record was recorded at Overdub Lane in Durham, North Carolina, as well as Glendale Drive. Overdub Lane is a studio that Superchunk have recorded at previously. That's where they did Indoor Living, as well as other North Carolina bands such as Portastatic, Athenaeum, Archers of Loaf, Squirrel Nut Zippers, Valiant Thor, The Mountain Goats. I don't like to claim them as a North Carolina band, but they do live here now. Chatham County Line, and randomly, the Meat Puppets, not from North Carolina. They were like one of the only ones that I knew the name of that was not from North Carolina. And I think Glendale Drive might be Mac's house. I don't know. The only thing recorded at that location, according to Discogs, are Superchunk records. So my guess is that
Mac's house.
He lives somewhere on something called Glendale Drive.
He probably just does his vocal comps at home.
Yeah. All right, so we'll get into the story later. But what made you choose this album for us to talk about?
Well, it's the comeback of sorts, though I guess they never officially broke up. It's kind of my introduction to the band, though I think I Hate Music is more of where I got on board with them. But this record coming out was more or less how I became aware of them. It's kind of this record coming out where it's like, hey, Superchunk is a band you should know. It's like, okay. I picked this one, honestly, as soon as I saw it. I only had the other records that I considered so that I would have something else to talk about. I picked this, and then I picked those. And I was like, it's going to be Superchunk. I just had those other ones just to send you something. And it's definitely one of the easiest records for me to talk about from this year. It was really not a hard choice at all. And I actually had just listened to it like 2 weeks ago or whatever, just before picking it for this episode. So I just put it on in the rental car when I landed in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago, which felt right. It's a very summer vacation kind of feeling record, and it's a record from North Carolina. It was kind of a homecoming kind of feeling to it. So I figured that fresh memory of it would be an easy one to talk about. And honestly, like, I saw it on the list, and I was like, I wouldn't mind to just listen to that again. I know I just listened to it, but I would be fine with putting that on again. I'm not going to be tired of hearing this record. Made sense to me.
Yeah, it's funny. We've been doing the show this is episode 340, and we've never covered a Superchunk record. We've never devoted an episode to it. That being said, we talk about them all the time, to the point where we've been told we can't put them on brackets anymore because they win too much. We talk about them a lot. We talk about them on I'm Listenings. Anytime there's news about them, anytime they put out a record, they tend to show up on a best of. Like, we talk about the band quite a bit. But like I said, we've never done a full episode on it. I did a little special bonus audio, which was actually just a project for my broadcasting program at the time, and I just put it up on the feed for people to hear. But it was like a little mini audio documentary about the band. So they have been talked about, but never an album for an episode. And one of the things that I was always wondering, like, I was always like afraid to choose one of their records because I don't know if it was just, this is like when I chose the Gaslight Anthem record and it was my turn to pick it, instead of you choosing it because they're like one of your bands. You chose the Superchunk record, and it's like, well, they're my number one band. And it's just kind of funny that I guess I was just gun shy on like, which one do? I don't want to waste it. I don't want to pick one that's not, one of their most fun records, but this is a good choice. This record is like a major record in their discography. It's a very important record, as we'll talk about in a little bit. It is my gateway to the band because this is the first album I'd heard from them I was hanging out with our buddy Grant, who runs Bitter Melody Records. I think we were going to a show. We were driving somewhere to Charlotte, either a show or a restaurant or something. And he put this on. He's like, have you heard this? And I hadn't. I was not familiar with this record. I knew the name. I didn't really know what they were all about. I kind of got them mixed up with a lot of the other super bands. So I was not entirely sure which band this was going to be. And I loved the record when I heard it then. And that kind of started the process of really getting into the rest of the catalog. You're right. I Hate Music is probably the one where we were headfirst into it. We were just like, we're all in on Superchunk now. And that would be you'd consider that one we waited for. And then they eventually just became one of my favorite bands, or my favorite band. You know, depending on the day of the week and how recently I've listened to it, it's either them or Teenage Fan Club. So yeah, I'm very glad to finally get one of these records on here. And I think it's this one. Maybe No Pocky would have been good. On the Mouth would have been good. And Foolish would have been good. I think those would have been, or In Strings too. There were actually a lot of decent, good options, but
yeah, I think Superchunk is interesting. The run of albums that starts with No Pocky and goes until Strings, maybe even later than that. It's such a consistent run of records that it's like, it's really hard to know what's the one, what's the most popular. And I mean, you can definitely make the argument that a record like No Pocky is the most important for the band, because it really does start that string of records, of great records that, you know, every Superchunk fan loves. And No Pocky for Kitty is certainly one of those really important records in their discography as being an entry point for most people to become aware of them. But I think this is an important record. I think this is, I mean, coming back from such a long break with a new album and then being really active since this released, I think it's one of the most important, one of the top 3 most important Superchunk records.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I'd say No Pocky, Here's Where the Strings Come In, and this one. Yeah, you're right. Those are probably the 3 most important albums. I mean, I guess you could say the first record's important, but it's the weakest record, like, by a lot. But it was the entry point, you know, or the introduction to the world of that band. But yeah, I think those 3 are probably more important than even the self-titled. Before we get into the history of the band, what do you think about, what are some of the also-rans of the sound at the time? You know, this is indie rock, but indie rock has really changed a lot by the time Superchunk returned to putting out records.
Yeah, indie rock is a really big genre by this point. It covers a lot of things, and it's not even all strictly rock music. You know, I kind of had 2 different approaches to how I looked at what else came out this year that fits in the same category as Superchunk. They don't really have any contemporaries at this point. Really none of the big indie bands that they would have been associated with in the early 90s are active anymore, or at least don't put anything out this year. Guided by Voices doesn't start putting out records again until 2011. So I kind of looked at, if you broaden from the sound perspective and maybe look at like what other bands are kind of legacy acts that are putting out records at this point that are still active, bands that were putting out records in the early 90s, the early or mid 90s. Weezer put out Hurley, not a good one. Belle and Sebastian put out Right About Love. I'm not familiar with that record, but Bad Religion did The Descent of Man, which is not especially well regarded. I don't think it's a terrible record, but it's kind of inessential in the Bad Religion discography. Jimmy Eat World put out Invented, which I do remember listening to probably that year when it came out, and it's kind of meh. That's kind of getting closer sonically. And then like Teenage Fan Club put out Shadows, and Not a Surf put out a record called If I Had a Hi-Fi. I think those 2 are, again, probably the closest thing to their peers who are putting out records at this time. But this year does also have some notable cases of what I would call Superchunk's children. And it's where bands are kind of copying that OG Merge sound a little bit. Screaming Females put out Castle Talk, which is one of the most important Dinosaur Jr. super chunky kind of indie rock records from this time period. That I think that record in Screaming Females really in general kind of sets off a string of all the new slacker rock and indie rock bands putting out records at this time. Ted Leo puts out Brutalist Bricks, which is the last Ted Leo and the Pharmacist record. There's a Thermals record that I don't think anybody really likes. And Titus Andronicus put out The Monitor, which is a big deal and does feel like a band that was influenced by Superchunk, kind of having their first big moment.
Yeah, and looking at Merge Records in 2010, I was trying to figure out, what maybe there's some similarities there. Merge in 2010 is weird. This is a weird list of records that came out that year. We have She and Him Volume 2 came out that year. That's the Zooey Deschanel M. Ward band. I don't think I realized that was on Merge. I was like, whoa, weird. Okay.
Twee retro pop with a actor that wants to be a singer.
Yeah. Probably the most important record that Merge put out, God, in the last 20 years even. Like, this record is massive. They put out The Suburbs by Arcade Fire. I don't think I knew Merge did that either. I don't know how I missed the fact that Merge put out Arcade Fire's, one of their... like Neon Bible was really big, but The Suburbs, I think, was like a really big breakthrough for mainstream attention for them. Wild. I don't think I knew that at all. It's just very funny to me. This is the same year that Fucked Up released Year of the Ox, which is a 12-inch EP. The Teenage Fan Club record you mentioned, Shadows, came out that year on Merge. We have albums from... There's a record from Spoon called Transference, which Spoon was doing big numbers too at the time, because I was reading articles that were like, Merge Records right now is putting out the biggest indie rock albums from the Arcade Fire and Spoon. Transference, I don't think, was the biggest Spoon record. I think the one before was bigger, but then there's stuff by Caribou, Destroyer, Wyoke. Like, it's funny, because you look at the bands that put out albums on Merge Records, none of them sound like Superchunk. Fucked Up is the closest, and that's not even that close.
Yeah. Somewhere between Fucked Up and Teenage Fan Club.
Yeah. And that Teenage Fan Club record is a slow and dark record. Like, it's not even, like, bright upbeat. Like, this is the 2000s Teenage Fan Club, which evolved into what the present-day Teenage Fan Club is. And, yeah, the post-creation stuff is very different from those records. But, yeah. Merge is, like, a big deal. It's like, Merge is actually a huge deal in indie music at the time. And so it's just kind of funny that it's the Superchunk label, because so few of their bands sound anything like Superchunk. Let's do some backstory, though. So, Superchunk initially formed as Chunk in 1989 in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, with a lineup of Mac McCon, Laura Balance, Chuck Garrison, and Jack McCook. Their name comes from a misspelling of Chuck Garrison's name in the phone book. He was written as Chunk Garrison in the phone book, so they decided to call themselves Chunk. And then they added the Super so they avoid confusion with a New York jazz group who also went by that name. Superchunk is better than just Chunk, so it was a good move. Good move. The same year, they formed Merge Records. Mac and Laura put together Merge Records to start releasing their own music as well as music from their friends. Superchunk eventually signs to Matador Records, who has really good distribution at this point, and began releasing music with their self-titled album in 1990. Jack McCook winds up leaving the band after that record, which is where Connecticut-based substitute teacher Jim Wilbur moves down to just fill in for Superchunk and never leaves. He is a North Carolinian now. They recorded their next record, No Pocky for Kitty, which is when drummer Chuck Garrison decides he wants to leave the band, so then they bring in John Worster to play drums, and then they continue releasing albums. So this is the lineup it's the classic lineup of Superchunk. It's the one that puts out most of their biggest records and most of their important albums, and they continue releasing records until the year 2001, where Here's to Shutting Up is released, and they go into a state of reduced activity. They did not break up. They did not even go on hiatus. They just started doing less stuff. So they slowed down performing live and releasing new music for 9 years. 2001 is when the last LP is out, and then they don't come back for the next LP until 2010. But during that time, they play shows. They play sporadic shows, especially at the Cat's Cradle in Chapel Hill. That's kind of their hometown venue. They did a 10th anniversary party for The Daily Show in 2006 in New York City. They played a benefit concert in Chicago in 2007. They played Coachella in 2009. And between studio albums, the band released their first 4 Clam Bakes live records, which are all, I think they initially were bootlegs that they then just gave official releases to. The Cup of Sand compilation was released in that time period. That was their 3rd compilation, collecting all their singles. And then they released Misfits and Mistakes, which was a single for the film Aqua Teen Hunger Force. It was the Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie, and they put out a single with the band performing the song, and then on the B-side, it's a version where Meatwad from Aqua Teen Hunger Force sings the song. It's very weird.
The Meatwad Superchunk collaboration could only happen
in this time period.
in 2009.
They contribute their cover of Destiny's Child's Say My Name to a compilation. And then in 2009, they released Leaves in the Gutter. This is the EP that precedes Majesty Shredding and features the song Learn to Surf on it. It has an electric version and an acoustic version on there, which gets re-recorded for the LP. Excellent EP. That is really the gateway for people to get back into Superchunk. And this album, Crossed Wires, was released as a 7-inch single with the B-side Blinders Fast version, as well as a digital copy of their demo version of Crossed Wires. They followed that up with a Digging for Something, a 7-inch single with February Punks as the B-side, and then the final 7-inch single was Learn to Surf with Sonny Brixton and Bad Influence, which is a cover of a Neon Christ song. And you can hear all of these EPs and singles from this time period on the Misfits and Mistakes compilation that came out in 2020. Was it last year? Was it 2024? 2024, 2023? I'm blanking, but it's funny. Like, I was trying to read the actual story about this time period, and there's not really one. There's no real descriptions or interviews that talk about why they were just less active. The only thing I can suspect is Mac had a kid during this time period, and she was probably born sometime after 2001, like not too long after, and so he's raising a small child, and I think the band just couldn't devote as much time. I don't know. I don't know if the others have kids. I really don't know if the other members of the band. Laura might have some kids too. I'm not sure. I don't know. They don't talk about their personal lives too much online. So like, I don't know who has kids and who doesn't, but that would be the right age. You know, they'd be in probably their late 30s during this time period, and like putting out music and raising a family. It's pretty tough. So that's what I suspect happened. Why there was such a long gap there. Cause,
yeah,
they're getting their kids.
There's definitely enough going on. I mean, having kids just naturally slowing down as they're reaching that kind of age where you don't have to keep going so hard all the time. And any band that's been running this long, it's not unusual for them to just slow down. The amount they slowed down is kind of surprising for them to have not ever officially taken any kind of break.
Yeah, during this time, the same time period, they did focus on some side projects. So John Worster starts playing with Bob Mould and the Mountain Goats after this point. Mac starts releasing... He had recorded a few Portastatic records, but he puts out like the biggest chunk of Portastatic's catalog after 2001. He did a little one-off band with Robert Pollard of Guided by Voices called Go Back Snowball. And Jim winds up joining Portastatic during this time period. He's on like the 2005 record and a couple after that. Which that's the record. That's probably the best Portastatic record, and it feels like the most like a Superchunk album.
Yeah. I also imagine, they were busier running the label.
Yeah, I mean, some
Because
big stuff was coming out in that time period.
merge does become a pretty big deal in the
Yeah.
2000s. Like we've said, the stuff that they put out in 2010, like they're kind of a huge label for an indie label. I'm sure that ate up more time too, especially between Mac and Lara, having two members running the label pretty much. I don't know when Lara's tinnitus
I have that actually.
becomes an issue, so I wondered
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so this record comes out. It gets lots of really positive press. Every single article says they've been quiet for a long time. I mean, which that is a really long time between LPs. 9 years between LPs is a long time. Regardless of if they played a lot during that time period, it's still a big gap. So this was treated as a comeback of sorts. There is like one article I read, I can't remember where it was, but it was basically saying that like they weren't on hiatus. This is no nostalgia tour. This is just the artists deciding to pick it up again and keep moving. So the record comes out. It's pretty universally praised. Metacritic has it at an 83, which usually means universal acclaim. But then some of the individual sites gave it really good ratings. So The Guardian gave it 5 stars. Drowned in Sound gave it 8 out of 10. Pitchfork gave it an 8.0. NME gave it 4 out of 5. AV Club gave it an A. Robert Christgau gave it an A- in a weird fucking review. God, he writes horribly. I don't know how he became that guy. And Rolling Stone gave it 4 out of 5. The Christgau review, he never reviewed any other album. This was the first album he reviewed for them. And it's like, why were you ignoring them? And then the review that I read was like, for a band who only put out one record that I enjoyed, slack motherfucker, which means he's talking about the single. He's one of those old school guys who just says, who uses singles as record. The
Back
Grammy
in
way.
my day, we used to call them records.
And he's like, it's the only good thing they did. And like, they put out so-called music after that. It's like, what is your deal, man? Why do people respect you? Because you have shit taste. And you write like a guy on acid. Like, I don't understand anything. I don't get how he got to become the dean or whatever they call him.
Up yours, Dean.
Yeah. Very weird. But then he gave like every record they put out after this A's. A-. Every single... He reviewed all of them after Majesty Shredding and gave them all A's. It's like, maybe you'll like the other ones, but I don't think he does retroactive reviews. So. Anyway. But yeah. So this basically gets the band active again. They don't really slow down. There's a pretty big gap between I Hate Music and What a Time to Be Alive. It's like a 5-year gap, but I think it's just because, I don't know. I don't know if they were still doing some other stuff at the time, but now they're a little bit more consistent. Now there's like about a 2 to 3 year gap between every record.
Yeah,
and
Mac has that solo record in probably 2015.
Yeah, that first one, Non-Believers or whatever, yeah.
So, actually, two self-titled records in 2015. Or solo records, 2015, so...
Yeah, so they put out 3 more studio albums after Majesty Shredding. They have a new one coming out in a month from now when we're recording this, so 2025. It's, what is it called again? It's got a funny name.
Songs in the Key of Yikes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also got a beach on the cover. So there's a little beach theme going on with the Superchunk. So in 2013, Laura Balance announced that she would no longer be performing live with the band due to her worsening hearing condition. She doesn't have tinnitus. She has something different, but it's still like, it acts very similar. It's like damage to whatever bone in your ear. And so then it just becomes painful to listen, to play live music very loud. It makes loud noises really difficult. So she does still record with the band. She's on all the records, but she's just a studio musician at this point. And, she was running merge with them throughout the time. She's replaced by bassist Jason Narducci live, who was playing with John Worster in the Bob Mould band. So he was filling in there.
It's hyperacusis. Yeah. Okay. So it's a sensitivity to... It's not the ringing. It's... Yeah.
Yeah. And then in 2023, drummer John Worster announced that he was leaving the band, saying he was tired of it. Didn't really elaborate. I don't think he's elaborated yet. I mean, he could have, and I would have heard it. It's weird. I think he wants to be a radio comedian more than he wants to be a musician, because he does that. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But he still plays with Bob Mould and the Mountain Goats, so you're not tired of them? I don't know.
Those are paycheck bands. I don't know.
he could have treated Superchunk as a paycheck man, unless he's like, I'm tired of coming up with ideas. Maybe that's what it is.
I've heard all Max riffs.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's gone. I don't know. If he ever elaborated, it was somewhere I didn't see it. Because he kind of always felt like he was doing his own thing the whole time anyway. So he is replaced by Bat Fang, Speedstick, and R-Ring member Laura King, who we've had on the show, along with her bandmate Betsy Wright of Bat Fangs, as well as X-Hex, and she took over for Jason Narducci because he stopped performing with Superchunk Live as well. So I don't know if it was a package deal, John's out, Jason's out, or what, but Jason's doing just fine with those REM tribute shows with Michael Shannon.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jason didn't have the time. I wonder if Jason was out first, or was thinking of leaving first, and then John's like, oh, man.
I mean, unless, maybe John quit and it gave Jason the okay to go too. I don't know. And then this year, 2025, it was announced that Secretly Group had purchased a 50% stake in Merge Records, and that Laura Balance was stepping down from Merge Records. Mac is still going to be one of the main people in control, but Secretly Group now has a 50% stake. And Secretly is a collection of labels, which is Secretly Canadian, Jaguar, Dead Oceans, and Numero Group. I didn't know about the Numero Group until I was doing research, and then I got really excited all of a sudden. And I was like, can we get some Superchunk Numero Group treatment? Because they do it so well. I mean, Superchunk keeps their shit collected and in print, so it's like, they don't really need Numero Group, but Numero Group does some cool stuff. So, but that is the history leading up to this record, and a little postscript on that as well. I mean, I was going to say, revisiting it, what did you think of it? But you just listened to it a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I love this record. Like, it is such a consistently enjoyable record. I would say it's, like I said, I think it's one of their most important records. I think not only because it was a comeback, in a way, like, it was the first new record after 9 years. It's also such an improvement on the previous two records from like 9-10 years before. I mean, I think it's such a good record. I think arguably it's the best thing they've done since 1995. I like Indoor Living. I've come around more on that record in recent years, but it's never been one of my favorite Superchunk records, and I think it is like a pretty noticeable, not a huge, but a noticeable step down in quality from Here's Where the Strings Come In, just overall. And I think it's indicative of where they went, and I don't even think that like Come Pick Me Up or Here's the Shutting Up are bad records necessarily, but it's just not as much the core Superchunk sound that you want to hear. And so as they kind of like drifted into different musical directions in the late 90s and then stopped putting out music for so long, and then they come back with a record that is just like classic, no pocky on the mouth, strings, quality, Superchunk songs. It's like, to not do that for that long and come back with this record is incredibly remarkable.
Yeah, it is wild to think about because, yeah, Strings was their like hit album. Like that's the one at the time had sold the best. Like they toured extensively on that album for a long time. Hyper Enough got tons of 120 minutes play, MTV play. Like it was probably their highest profile point in their career. And then they followed it up with Indoor Living, which was like, it's a good record, but it's weird. It's like them experimenting a bunch. And it's in my bottom half of their catalog as far as like the records I go to the most. It is a good record and there's really good songs on it, but it's not what they should have followed it up with, Strings with, because it's just like, well, you went too weird and too different on that album. And I think they were trying to go with like a Foolish type record where it's like it's different, it's slower, but because that record was a little bit more that's a breakup record, that's a little bit leaning into like the Sunny Day Real Estate of things at the time.
Yeah, Foolish is it has such a consistent emotional through line. Indoor Living doesn't. Indoor Living is a collection of songs.
Yeah.
And some of them are diversions and experimentations, and it's just a little lighter on what you have come to expect from Superchunk by that point. I think it's a great record, but like I said, it is moving in a different direction, and then they continue to go in that direction.
Yeah, because Come Pick Me Up feels more like they were trying to reflect the indie rock of like the year 2000. Like, I don't think they were trying to do their brand of sound. I think it was another experimentation in the sense that they were doing something a little bit more. It's more accessible than Indoor Living, but it is still different for them. And then Here's to Shutting Up is like a mostly acoustic record, which was an odd choice, really. They hadn't really done one like that, so I guess that's what made it also special. But yeah, they released 3 kind of weird records in a row. Come Pick Me Up sold well. I think they said at the time that was their best-selling record, but I think that's more of a case of, well, the ones before did really well, and this one just kept that momentum, on top of the fact that I think just everybody had some of their like highest-selling records during that time period. I think that just shows you, like, right before the internet ruined the music industry, as far as the money-making side of things. I think that might have been like the peak where it was like, just every single band had distribution everywhere, and you could just get it in so many more places than you could before, and that's why stuff in the like early 2000s is like it's a highest peak for a lot of those bands. But
well, yeah, I mean, you have the name recognition, you have the distribution models in place, and you have a limited access to the music prior to purchasing it. So you just have people buying records based on the strength of, well, I like Superchunk.
Yeah.
And you listen to it and you're like, oh, I'm disappointed in this record.
Yeah, I don't know what the consensus on that record is. I don't think they really have anything that's panned, but yeah, I don't know what people think of that one.
I mean, I think everything they're superly consistently regarded band. I think everything is generally rated and reviewed across the board and pretty much the same average. But my own personal listening, I have favorites and records I don't especially care for. That being said, that again, like I said, I don't think Come Pick Me Up and Here's Shredding Up are bad records. They aren't exactly what I want. Majesty Shredding, exactly what I want.
Yeah, and to come back 9 years later with like one of your best records in their entire catalog. I mean, I would hope that after you were gone that long, you would come back with some of your best material, because if they'd come back and that record came out and it was a stinker and like nobody liked it, do they continue? It's hard to say. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I mean, they have enough of a legacy at that point that they probably still would have tried again, but maybe it would have been a longer gap between records. I don't know. I don't know what happens if Majesty Shredding comes out and it's not great.
Yeah. I mean, the Portastatic records are good.
Yeah.
I think having a different name on it helps for them to be as different as they are. Not that they're like wildly different sounding, because Mac can only sound like Mac.
Yeah.
Jim, and then Jim Wilbur playing his guitar the way he does with Mac singing. It's like, well, that's half of Superchunk.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe more than half of Superchunk.
Yeah, I feel like, the defining sound of Superchunk is Mac and Jim together. Not to take away anybody else's contributions to the band, but that's what you think of when you think of their sound, is you think of Mac's high voice and then those noisy guitars that are just very warm and inviting tones, but just squealy, squally, especially the 90s stuff is like that. But the tone on this record is fucking phenomenal. Like, this is one of those albums, when I do my rankings of Superchunk, there are times where I'm like, is this my favorite? I don't know if it is or not. That's the problem with, like, trying to rank your favorite band's records, is that you love them all differently for different reasons. I mean, there are some obvious ones that are better than others, but I've always said I'm On the Mouth is my favorite, but I don't even know that if I 100% think that on a day-to-day basis, or if that's just like, I chose that one as my favorite, and that's what I just keep saying. It could just be a case of mood, where I'm just like, today, Majesty Shredding's my favorite Superchunk record. Yeah, it's definitely in the top 5 for me. It's definitely, it's probably my number 2 overall. Like, I adore this record, and it's their sound perfectly. Like, they sound like Superchunk again, where they kind of didn't for a couple records. I mean, they did, but they didn't, I think it's their best record since coming back, too. I think everything they've done since then hasn't been as good as this album. There's excellent albums, but not quite to this level. We talk about it here all the time, about the comeback record is oftentimes not as good as where the band left off. And Superchunk is one of the bands that breaks that. Like, they didn't break up. They still played shows and they put out some singles and EPs, but they were essentially dormant for that time period. So they were as active as bands who do break up or go on hiatuses during that time period. So I think it's safe to say this is a little bit of a comeback record. And yeah, they kept playing together live. So I mean, that probably makes it easier to maintain that cohesion going forward. But for all intents and purposes, it's a reunion record. And yeah, like I said, it's better than what they left off with, because they left off with Here's to Shutting Up. And this record's better than all of those records. Strings is the record that people cite as one of their biggest records. So like, that's where the line is, I guess, as far as like they went back to Strings level, which I think that's actually a fair comparison, because No Pocky and On the Mouth are much noisier and punkier than Strings, and Majesty Shredding sounds more like Strings than No Pocky.
Yeah, so this record, it's so consistent from beginning to end. I mean, I've noticed this in the past, and maybe have mentioned this in talking about Superchunk in general throughout the years. This record, it's like even the filler songs are great. Like, the deep cuts on this record are great. And even ones like, I think songs like, if I look at the track list, I kind of forget what Rope Light sounds like.
Yeah.
But then you listen to it and it's like, Rope Light, like that, like chorus is so catchy. It's like, how do I forget this song? And it's because it's sitting there between Winter Games and Hot Tubes. Like there's this record has Rope Light with that amazing chorus, but it also has Digging for Something, Crossed Wires, Learn to Surf, that are just such feel-good, anthemic, sing-along songs. It's like they had so much quality material going into this record.
Yeah, that string of songs at the top, Digging for Something, My Gap Feels Weird, Rosemary, and Crossed Wires. That is a phenomenal string of songs there. And when Slow Drip came on, as I was re-listening to it, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about this song. Like, that one's not as jump out at you, because then they follow that with Fractures and Plaster and then Learn to Surf, which are other two massive songs on the record. And then listening back to Slow Drip, I was like, it's got a killer chorus, which is most Superchunk songs. Is just every single thing has like a great chorus on it. And then Winter Games and Rope Light, yeah, like to me, the weakest stretch of the record is everything after Learn to Surf, but I think it's just because it peaked so high with Learn to Surf, because Learn to Surf might be my favorite song by Superchunk. Like, I was trying to think of like an individual song that I liked more, and I couldn't really think of one, because whenever I listen to Learn to Surf, I listen to it on repeat. Like, it's finished and I start it over. We were talking about this being like a beach record. When I go to the beach, I put this record on, and every time I get to Learn to Surf, I go back and go back. And I usually sing it like 3 times on the way, like wherever, from a restaurant to back to the house that we're staying at. I think it's just one of the best songs they've ever written.
Yeah, that was an easy, like, early favorite for me. I definitely really latched onto that song too when I first got into Superchunk and was listening to the new records, and it's such a great song. I can't even explain how good it is, because I don't even think it's like the general consensus. I mean, it's pretty popular. It's actually in their top 10 on Spotify. That's sort of surprising. Maybe that's because you and I have pumped up the numbers. And
yeah, I was kind of curious what is the top 10. It's weird that it's so Foolish heavy. Top 10 also has some newer stuff in the rotation too, so that kind of like fucks with. Just give me the numbers. Like, I don't really like their like, well, we put the new single in the top 10. It's like, I know it's because it's based on like recency, so like people are listening to these songs recently, and that's why that's what the top 10 is kind of structured around. It's algorithm. Yeah. It's not. I'd rather just have numbers. Give me flat numbers for a top 10, but then it would probably look pretty static for a while too if you did that. But yeah, it's like Foolish heavy, new stuff, Hyper Enough, Precision Auto, and Learn to Surf. Which
Learn to Surf almost has 1 million listens.
Yeah, it's 924,000 plays. I bet if you combine it with the EP version or the comp version, it might be over that number. Really? Yeah. Looking at this, I'm like, I want the real shit. I guess I could go to Last FM to get like their true top 10. But even then, that's just the people who still have Last FM and are scrobbling. But out of curiosity, I want to look at that while I'm here. Let's see, that's the last 7 days. We're going to do all time. So, all time, top 10, Driveway to Driveway, Like a Fool, Hyper Enough, Slack Motherfucker, Seed Toss, Digging for Something, Hello Hawk, Learn to Surf, the first part, and This Summer.
Oh, weird.
That's got to be, that's the last time people were using Last FM in high numbers when they put out a song.
Yeah, Hello Hawk's in there too.
Yeah, Hello Hawk. That is a 2000s Last FM scrobbler number for sure. The numbers aren't even that high there. I mean, it's 54,000 for Driveway to Driveway, and like on Spotify, that song's got 3 million plays, 3.5 almost. So weird how Driveway to Driveway became like their biggest song, but
I mean, it's a great song.
I mean, it rules. It's a great song. It is just funny that their emo record has been proven to be like the long-standing popular stuff, which is not what you would expect, but. Because if I'm being honest, I would expect it to be mostly strings and no Pocky songs in the top 10, but it's not like that. I don't know. It's just such a good batch of songs. Like, I just cannot get over how good all of these songs are. Because my least favorite song on there is maybe, I don't know. I mean, I've got 4.0s as my lowest number I go with. So maybe it's Winter Games or Hot Tubes or something like that, but they're still really good songs.
Everything at Once, probably my weakest.
The closer?
Yeah.
It's a good closer, though.
Yeah.
Like, it's a good closer. It's got some fun oohs in it. Yeah. I wound up liking that one a little bit more this time than I had in the past, but yeah, I could see that. Most of the time, the last song is not my favorite, but
yeah. It's probably the least standout song to me on the record. Because, like, Winter Games, I don't know, I like that song. I mean, I think it's maybe in the bottom third of songs on the record, but I think it's a really good song. It has just certain lines that stand out to me. I was about to get out the saw to cut a hole in the icy ice. It just really stands out to me. It's very Mac writing.
I did want to say something a little bit about Mac's songwriting. I don't know what any Superchunk song is about. Foolish is probably the only album that you do kind of know something about it. But then he also says that, like, what people think a lot of those songs are about are not what everybody thinks that whole record's about him and Laura. But even he's like, it's not. He's like, some are, but not all of them.
And I feel like Winter Games, that song it feels kind of like a Weaker Than song to me. So I always kind of like it for that. It's like a Superchunk version of a Weaker Than song.
Did Superchunk ever play with Weaker Thans?
Probably on festivals, but by the time the Weaker Thans was somebody big, Superchunk were pretty much inactive.
That's true. Their peaks don't line up. Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I mean, yeah, there's maybe a chance they play together somewhere, but yeah. It could have been early on, too. If they did a Canada run, maybe. Around Fallow or something like that, but I don't know. I tried Googling it, and then you don't really get anything. What do you think the lasting legacy of this record is? You know, this is a 15-year-old album at this point.
I think that it has appropriately been surpassed by the attention that the classic records have gotten and continue to get. I think this record is very important in reinvigorating people's interest in Superchunk and introducing, you and I are Superchunk fans because of this record, because of them coming back and putting out records again. That pushed us to go listen to their classic records. And I think in terms of quality, this record certainly is on par or better than a lot of their 90s output, but it's not as important. It's not as essential. And if I were introducing somebody to Superchunk, like I'm now knowing what I know about their discography, I wouldn't give them this record necessarily, but I would definitely make a strong case for listening to this one at some point, pretty early into getting into them. Like I would say, here, listen to Strings, listen to the No Pocky, listen to the classic records, because they are really important records, but their new stuff is really good too. So, and this is a perfect example of, I mean, it is the best thing they've done and since they've been back, which is, I guess, kind of a bummer. Not a bummer, because I do think they've continued to put out really enjoyable records, but it is somewhat disappointing that nothing has matched it.
Yeah, I was thinking about the catalog after this. I could see if you got Majesty Shredding, you're like, oh, they're back, and then they followed up with I Hate Music, which is trying to continue in a lot of the sounds of Majesty Shredding, but also that record, from all I've heard about it, was a kind of miserable recording experience for the band. They had lost a close friend of the band right before going into studio, and so the whole record is them kind of dealing with that, and they weren't in a good place individually. So it's a weird record. It's a great record because there's so many really fun songs on it that I really love, but it is a strange record because they're trying out some things again on it too. They're not going as full indoor living with that album. They're doing more of what they did on Come Pick Me Up, which is a little bit more moodier and dynamic kind of sounding stuff. But it has some classics in there that they still pull out occasionally live. And then they follow that up with What a Time to Be Alive, which was them doing an 80s hardcore record. That's just straight up what they were going for with that album. That's a political album. It was made, in the Trump administration, and it's an anti-Trump album. They followed that up with,
Acoustic Foolish, but
it doesn't really count, but it is there. And then they follow that up with the most recent record, 2022, that I'm having a brain fart and cannot remember the name of the album.
Wild Loneliness.
What was I thinking it was called?
Wild Loneliness, I will say, of their comeback material, everything after Majesty Shredding is their best record.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
It's a big swing, and it is Superchunk doing what they have done in the past of not continuing to do what you want Superchunk to do. But I do think this one works really well. It's the chamber pop influenced record. Yeah, they definitely took big swings. They definitely were coming off of doing the Acoustic Foolish record as well, and that I think impacts some of the writing and arranging.
It's a COVID album too. They wrote it at home, so you could only writing at home. You might lean towards more acoustic stuff to begin with. So that record is that's a time and a place specific thing. But I do agree. I do think it's their best record since Majesty Shredding. So the new record, I have very high hopes for. Songs of the Key of Yikes. Everything I've heard sounds like they're doing the Majesty Shredding thing again. It's the sound you want them to do. They put a beach on the cover again. So to me, that's like a thematic kind of thing. Like, we're doing that again. And all the singles
in August,
still in the summer. Yep. The first song, Bruised Lung, loved that song. That is like one of the best songs they've released after Majesty Shredding. So I do think the new record is going to be great. Everything I've heard is good, which they've put maybe 4 or 5 singles out so far. One of the singles is they had released like 2 years ago, but it's on the album. Yeah, so I'm hoping it's got a Majesty Shredding theme all the way throughout, and if it does, I think it's going to be. It could be the best record since Majesty Shredding. We'll see, but I'm very happy that they're doing it again. This kind of sound again.
At this point, there's probably too much emotionally invested in Majesty Shredding. That's such a load-bearing record as a Superchunk fan. For us in particular, it has so much nostalgia and memories attached to it that it's now very difficult to assess the quality of anything they put out in comparison to it. It's really going to just come down to, does it stick with you? Do you want to come back to it as often? And that's not something you're going to know until 5 years after.
Yeah.
Because I've enjoyed everything they've done since Majesty Shredding, but like, What a Time to Be Alive, I haven't really come back to very much. Wild Loneliness, I haven't come back to as much, but that's probably more to do with my broken dopamine receptors. The need for a novel experience
outweighs re-listening to a good album.
And maybe, I mean, it's been 3 years. It's probably time to revisit it.
I listened to it a lot when it came out. Like, I did that with What a Time to Be Alive, too. But I think What a Time to Be Alive is my least favorite since they came back. Just because I don't really want Superchunk to do a hardcore record, was my takeaway. I was like, okay. I mean, there's stuff on there that just fits in their sound, but the overall vibe of that record, when it came out, I was like, yes, this is what we need right now. A hyper-political record from Superchunk. A band who's never been hyper-political in their entire career. In the music. I think...
Yeah, that's a funny thing. Superchunk, not known for having political lyrics, but you have always been very clear on what the politics of Superchunk are.
Yeah, right. It is funny. I guess maybe they do that on purpose because they're like, well, we don't really put it in our lyrics, so like we should make sure that people know where we stand on certain issues in our social media and what we say from the stage and anything we've ever said in interviews and press. So yeah, there's no mistaking their politics, but also it is funny that if you only heard the music and never heard anything else from them, you wouldn't know until you hit What a Time to Be Alive. And even then, that's even some of his most straightforward lyrics too. Like, those are the albums. That's the album with like the least amount of like, I don't know what that means, but it sounds cool, which is most of his lyrics. Yeah, I mean, it's also really hard to be impartial, I think, with this band for us, because we're emotionally invested in this band. This is one of our bands, and everything they do, I'm excited to hear. So, whereas other people, I saw a lot of complaints about Wild Loneliness, where people were like, "Oh, they're doing this." Like, people were disappointed they went in acoustic direction again. And maybe conceptually I would have agreed with that. Like, oh, I don't want them to do an acoustic record. But they nailed it so well that it didn't bother me at all. So, I don't know. I think we've sufficiently covered Superchunk. I mean, I know we were supposed to be talking about Majesty Shredding, but we talked the whole catalog. So I guess that means you and I will never pick one of these records again to do on the show.
Which is, probably fair to our regular listeners.
They're like, shut up already.
We've heard everything you're going to say about Superchunk. Yes, Jim Wilbur is the greatest guitarist of all time.
Yeah. But we know one listener who will not be as upset about us talking about Superchunk, who's probably arguably the other biggest Superchunk fan we know, with Zach in the Discord there. But I mean, okay, the last thing I'll say. on that legacy that this record has. It has two main purposes. One, to bring the band back to prominence, where people could pay attention to them again, and then they're busy again putting out records. But the influence. I feel like the Superchunk influence after this record started popping up all over again in a lot of like indie and punk bands of the following, next couple years.
Yeah.
Power pop is a big part of that sound. I see bands referencing old Superchunk records more after this album comes out.
Yeah. It's very funny. Like I mentioned, the children of Superchunk having that big moment in this time period, and like the stuff that follows of that slacker rock and power pop and kind of Chapel Hill indie rock influenced stuff that was coming out after this record comes out. Like it does sort of balloon a little bit. It's conspicuous timing. It's it's almost like Superchunk was like, oh yeah. Well, I think we can beat you to the punch. Like we can still do it.
Yeah, there was an article. I think it's the Pitchfork review of this record, and it talks about how before Superchunk went on hiatus, emo was very much aping the Superchunk sound, especially talking about like the third wave emo. Not even third wave. I think it's like the second wave stuff, like the stuff in the late 90s, that kind of emo, like Get Up Kids being like, and Motion City Soundtrack being like heavily indebted to the Superchunk sound.
I think even a band like Promise Ring.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was when I saw
like
name
they
drop.
were listening to Superchunk records.
Yeah, and so that was their influence at the time. And then even the review was talking about, and indie rock sounded like Superchunk. And then when they came back in 2010, then they're like, but indie rock doesn't sound like Superchunk anymore. Indie rock sounds like Arcade Fire now, who Superchunk have a hand in. So it's Superchunk coming back and playing this style of music in 2010 was a little different for what indie rock was doing at the time, because I don't like that era of indie rock much at all. I'm not a fan of that time period of stuff. So yeah, it's an important record for the influence of Superchunk on the next wave of bands that came out. So it's an important record in their catalog for sure. But yeah, well, did we win?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you chose the record before you had any other maybes that you were even considering. You're like, that's the one we're doing, and you didn't even finish looking. So
yeah, I mean, I guess the only other question is, I know you're a 5-star man on this record, and I have had this one as a 4.5 for a really long time, and I guess the question is, do I tip the scale? Is this a generational record? Is this a quarter-century 5-star, one of the best? And I think if I look back at the last 25 years of music, yeah, this is one of the best records.
yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. Like, I genuinely consider this, I mean, not to tip the bit, I consider this one of the best albums of the 21st century. So, you're going to hear me talk about this record again this year at some point. I'm not going to tell you where it's at, but, yeah, you'll hear me talk about this again. I won't go that deep on it. I won't then, but it'll be there though, for sure. So yeah, I consider this a 5-star record. This is one of my personal all-time favorite albums, especially of this last 25 years. Yeah, we definitely won. We definitely won on this one. And, everyone can rest easy knowing that we will not be selecting a record to talk about, though we will probably talk about the new record when it comes out on the News of the World I'm Listening combo, and probably the end of the year best of list, and you'll hear me talk about this album specifically on the 21st Century Breakdown, so Superchunk will come up again in the show, but we'll try and be a little more
Yeah. After this
judicious.
year, we'll try and tone it down.
Yeah, we'll lay low on it. We'll talk about something new if they put something new out next year, but yeah, we'll lay low on talking about the back catalog of Superchunk. So, all right, I think that will do it for us. So thank you all so much for listening. Let us know if you enjoyed this slightly tweaked format of the show. We'd love to hear some feedback on it. But yeah, we appreciate it. And you can follow us on all forms of social media. punklotopod at Gmail. Voicemail line 202-688-PUNK. punklotopod. Yeah, on all the socials. Patreon.com. All that good stuff. So thank you all so much for listening. And we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.